Hello everybody, welcome back to my training channel. This is Atul from IT Codes. Today we will be learning how to implement CRUD functionality with the Entity Framework in ASP.NET MVC. We are learning concept of Entity Framework, scaffolding, automated generation of controllers and views, and how to implement the CRUD in MVC. So let's dive into the coding and start learning how to implement the CRUD functionality. Now for creating an MVC application, first and foremost, right now I'm using Visual Studio 2022. Click on create new project. And from that you have to select ASP.NET MVC. You will be having more options over here, that is core, web API and everything. Just scroll down and you will be having an application such as MVC, that is ASP.NET normal MVC. Don't select core. ASP.NET web application. Click on it. It will ask you the location. So we give the name and the location to the project. MVC CRUD. I give this name. My location is this D, and I use the framework as 4.8. Just click on create. And from this, you have to select MVC. Now, if you want to use this MVC model, you have to select this particular portion. This will be a normal web application. This is an empty web application. We select MVC over here. And this will create the project. Now, for the new people who does not know MVC, what MVC architecture is, that is consisting of model, view, and controller. Instead of the direct communication, it communicates to the database via a model. View will be viewable to the users, that is, which is visible on the screen, and controller will be having your business logics. Now, when you create this application, you can see this is a folder structure which is not different from a normal web application. Over here, you see a controller folder, you see a model folder, you see a view folder. So this is the basic structure which is already created when you create a normal web application, which is an MVC web application. Now, if you go in your controllers, you can see a controller is already made by default. Default controller, home controller is already created when you create a normal MVC application. Now you can observe that over here it is written as public class home controller and it extends a controller class. And over here you will be seeing some functions, methods, which are having some names: index, about, contact. Now how this normal MVC web application work is that it will call this particular function on a particular route. Index will be called as slash, about will be called as slash about. That will be learned when you create a normal CRUD application over here. So this is just overview how your home controller is working. We will be defining our own controller and then we will be using it in your MVC application. Now first and foremost, what we want to do is we want to create a model. Now what a model consists of? The model consists of the definition of your database, basically the table which you are going to insert that particular data. So first and foremost, while creating your MVC CRUD operation using your ASP.NET C#, we will be creating a model over here. So for creating model, you just click on add and you give as class. Now remember, try to give the class name the same as your database table name which you will be creating. We will be creating the database also. Right now we are just creating the class first. So for this, I give the name as category because I want to create a table named as category having two fields and store the data inside. So I define the name as category. Just select the type of perfect and I click on add. Now over here, you can just see that the namespace itself is your application name dot models. So all the models which will be creating in your entire CRUD application, right now we will be just working on one. will be inside your model. So whenever you want to create a model, you have to right click on your models folder and then create a class. So over here, the class is created. Now the category class will be containing the definition of the two fields which I want. One is ID and one is the name. So for that, I define the model over here. I say public integer ID get and set. Now this explains what it does. Your model allows you to set the value to the database and get the value from the database. So it will work as a mediator between your actual SQL database and your application. Second thing I want is public string name. So I give the value as name and the thing is string. So I create a string. Now for validations, there is one facility inside your model itself that you can bind it over here that it is required. So I just specify an annotation. I just write it as required over here. It will give a red line because it needs a particular import. So when you write it, you will be having an option over here. It says using system.componentModel.data annotations. So this is for your validation. So this is a simple class which is created over here, that is category model. Now in this application, we'll be using context API, that is data context, and not your normal ADO. So we'll be using that EDX files and everything. So for that, what we'll be doing is we have to first create the entity framework context. So for creating the entity framework context, what we have to do is we'll be using entity framework over here. So for that, I'll go in your Nugget package manager. You can do it with console and you can do it with this particular GUI mode. So I go in the GUI mode. You will have two options over here, install and updates and browse. So I don't want to go and install. These are already inside your application. So it is showing you over here. Now what we want is we want the entity framework. There are two ways in your creation of this. That is, you can use entity framework and you can use the old ADO concept. I don't want to use the old ADO concept. I'll be using entity framework over here. So for creating it, we need the entity framework. So define it as entity framework. You can observe I previously used this. So it is showing me entity framework core. We are not creating in core application. So you have to give as entity framework over here. The first option is selected over here. This will show you the versions of here. You can take the latest one, that is 6.5.1. You have to tick the project over here and you click on install. So this will install the entity framework inside your application, not in your system. Remember, this is application specific. So in your reference, you can see that entity framework will be added over here. So this data extension. So entity framework is already installed when you click on install over here. Now we can create that particular DB context file. Now why the DB context file? That DB context file will be containing the connection to your database which will be using your entity framework. So that has to be used over here. So for that, what we do is we just create a different class for that entity framework. And for entity framework class, what we do is we create a new class over here. And for that, we go inside your models and give the class. So that class is over here. You can name it anyway. I named it as my context, or you can just name it as my DB context. That will be more appropriate. So again, it is inside your model. So it will be having this model particular file. So that is the same package which will be having. Now this context class should extend the entity framework base class. That is the DB context class. So for that, we just say extends and extends DB context. You observe that when you just click on enter after that, you get this namespace automatically. That is system.data.entity. When you work directly with SQL or ADO, it will be system.data.sql or system.data.sql client and something like that. but we are using entity framework. So for that entity framework, we say system.data.entity. You extended it, that is the DB context. Now we have to create a constructor of this class. So for creating constructor, I just give the name same as my application class. So that is my DB context. And over here, we just extend it with base. And after base, what we do is we give a name over here. My connection or my connector. That is the name of your connection string. This will be the name of your connection string, which will be defining in your web config. We'll be doing it right now only. So just specify the name. Remember, this should be the same name as you will be doing in your web config file. So this is done. And after that, we have to give each and every model over here. So basically, the context class will be containing the models DB set. So context will be called first. It will pass on to values to the model, and model will be passing to the value of the database. So over here, what we'll be doing is public DB set. To define as DB set, we have to give the name as category because my model name is category over here. We'll specify it over here as categories, or category will also do. So this is how you specified your DB set for your model, which is created previously, that is category model. So what we did is we created model, we use the entity framework class, we did it with your package manager over here, Nugget package manager, and then we created a DB context class, which will be used to connect using this connection string, and you specify the DB set of that particular category table. So this much is done. Now the step comes that we have to give the connection string, exact actual connection string, which is to be used. Now the connection string has to be defined in a common place. Now your web applications, since it was normal ASP.NET, not core or not anything or not MVC, the web config file is a file which is used by your entire application. Entire application configurations can be done over here. You can see there are some previous configurations which are already done, which are already used inside your application. We want to create our own configuration over here. So for that, what we'll be doing is the connection string has to be defined by a connection string. So you define as connection strings. It will pop up over here. Just have to press enter. So in this block, you have to give the connection string. Now, as you can see, you have over here add key. We also have to add a name over here. So for that, you define as add and the name of the connection string. Now, as I said, the name of the connection string should be what, which is defined over here. So I pop it. So there is no typo mistake, and this is done. And then what we have to do is the actual connection string. So now the pop-up says connection string. Now where you get the connection string? So for that, first we have to create the database. So I go inside your server app explorer, data connections. I say add connection. Add connection. The source should be SQL Server database file. Now if you are using a different studio, that is your SQL Studio, apart from this, not the internal, then you have to create the database over there, and you can create the path or the connection string from there. But I am creating the database from the Visual Studio itself. So over here, you just specify the name of the database. So we give the name as CRUD. This is my database name, and you can browse and select the path also, but I'll keep it in the default location. It will go in my documents. You can change the path also. Windows authentication, and then you click on OK. It will ask the database file does not exist. So would you like to create it? I say yes, I want to create it. So this will create the database file, and you can see the MDF over here. Now here is your connection string. So you just click on that connection string property from the properties, copy that entire string, and you paste it inside your connection string equals to portion. Now this is absolute string. There is one more string also that is containing that LocalDB / MySQLDB. You can use whatever string you want. And I'm using this direct absolute path over here. This will also work. So go over here, and then one more thing you have to add over here is that provider name. This will also pop up. Provider name means which provider you are using. We are using SQL client. So over here to specify as system.data.sql, S is capital, SQL client. C will be also capital. So this is your connection string. So connection string has to be copied from the property of the database, which we create from here. But one more thing which you have to add over here is the provider name, that should be system.data.sql client. So this connection string is now defined. So this much steps are now done. So that connection is also done. We have written over here also, and we have created the model and the context file. So this much is done. Now what we want to do is we want to use migrations. Now what migrations are basically? Migration is your facility which allows you to create the table from the model which you created over here. There are two ways. We can create the database directly from SQL, and then we can create a model over here. Or what we can do is we can create the model over here, and following that scaffolding method, we are using scaffolding method over here, and then we can create the table directly into the database which we specified over here using this particular model. So this is one way. Other ways also I'll create a new tutorial for that. But this is the first way for creating the database using migrations. Now for using that, you have to go inside your Nugget package manager, and inside that go in your console, package manager consoles. And over here, you have to write as enable migrations. Enable dash migrations. There is no typo mistakes. Remember that. So this will enable the migration portion inside your application. It is saying you that checking if the context targets an existing database. If there is some error, it should give you an error. If everything is perfect, that is your path is perfect and everything is perfect, it will return back to the prompt. So you can see there is a folder which has appeared that is having configurations. Now we go inside your configuration, you can see that MyDB context is defined over here. Models are defined over here. So this is how your configuration is done. Now after that, one more command we have to fire over here, that is add dash migration. Add migration, and you have to specify as initial create. The command is add dash migration dash initial create. So this is a command initial create which specifies that create the table for the first time only. So just press enter. If everything is perfect, it will say take some time, and then it will be on the prompt back. So you can say scaffolding migration initial create. It came back to the prompt, so it is done. You can see in the migration folder, you will get an initial create file. Now you observe the file, you can see it is your database structure. It is create categories table. And so this will create that particular dbo.categories, which is specified over here. Will be set category, and that name should be categories over here. So this is that. Now after that, one last command which has to be fired is update the database. Update dash database. Now it says that specify the web rows if you want. Initial create applying explicit migration from this particular file. Running seed method, it came back to your file. Now this should have created a database that is to your connection. So we again add connection, add browse, and from my documents it should be CRUD which is done. So we select that CRUD. It will give the name of your connection over here. Now when you go and click on this, the database should be created. So this is how your database and tables are created using your migrations over here. Now is the time to create your controller and view and model. Now scaffolding and your entity framework has one automated way. The way which we will be using right now is your automated creation using your Visual Studio prompt only. So for that, what we'll be doing is go in your controller. Inside your controller, you have to create a new controller for that. And that should be the same name as your database table name. That is one practice over here. So what we do is we just right click add to define as controller. Now we click on controller. There are three options: empty controller, which will bring an empty controller; controller with a method of read, write, and actions. That is, it will provide the functions, but it will be blank. And the last is MVC controller with view using entity framework. So in this training session, what I'm trying to do is we will be creating that automated way of entity framework. So select that entity framework, last option, MVC 5 controller with views using entity framework. And you click on add. It will ask you the model class. So you specify the model class over here. Your model class is category. It is asking you the data context class, which is communication bridge. So you say data context class, and that class name is MyDB. So create that this particular use. And over here, you are having an option, generate views. Now this particular tick, what it will do is, it will create the controller also. It will go inside your view and it will create a view folder for the category table, and it will create all the views. All the views means index, create, edit, and delete. This generate view tick itself. You can use the layout page over here. Now what layout pages does is, inside your application, you go in your views, you have a shared folder. Inside that, you will be having as layout, which is already created. A simple layout is already done by your .NET itself. So select that layout. So every file will be using this particular layout. This is templating basically. So you just name this categories controller and say add. Now if everything is good, then it will be using the scaffolding and it will create the view and the controller. If there is some error, it will give you an error over here. So you have to wait for some time and then it will be created. Now you can observe that categories controller is created. You can just go in your views. You are having categories over here, and inside that also you see that this is already created. So as I said, it will create a category folder. You will have create, delete, details, edit, and index HTML. So this is an automated way, a quick way, but this can be used with normal table structure, small tables and everything. Rather, the proper approach will be creating this manually. In the next tutorial, I'll be showing you how to create this particular thing manually, but this was a scaffolding folder. Now, after that, to try an application, we just have to click on this. The application should start. It will show you index over here. If everything is good, it should run directly. If there is some problem, it will show me an error over here. We'll come back to this views and everything, how it is working. You can see there is new. So you say create new. It gives the create form. I take the category as shoes. I click on create. So this is created. Simple way. If I click on edit, it will go to edit mode. If I want to type jeans and save, it will save. So your entire working of a CRUD application is in 2 minutes by the automated way. We'll be learning the normal way also, but this is how it works. If you click on create new again, and I say shorts, create. So this everything is going inside the database. It is fetching on the view. You can click on edit, delete, and details. If you go on details, you see details, back to list. If I click on delete, it will ask you whether you want to delete. So these things are coming from where? These are done from your automated views which are created over here. Now let's understand the fundamental, because understanding the working of this particular thing which is created automated is very important. So we close all the files. Now I switch on to category controller. Now how controllers work in your MVC application is that, as I said, you will be having functions over here. Index it is calling this particular CSHTML named as index, right? So the path should be something as when you run that application, I stop it and run it again. You observe it is localhost, the dynamic port which is created, and then you can have categories. So when you say categories, it will call the index file from this particular folder. And that index file will search for a function which is named as index inside your controller. You can observe that the file name is same as the controller's function name. So over here there is function name as details. So the file name which is automatically generated is details. So each and every function is having a file over here which is calling and which is displaying and doing the dynamic works automatically. Now over here we jump onto the index first. So index, you can see it is written as db.categories.toList. Now what is this db? We created a context file, that is the db context file. You can observe that in your controller, the first and foremost thing is you defined a private variable which is defined automatically. When we will be going on a manual way, we will be doing this manually. After this particular training session, I will be creating a new session for creating this manually instead of the automated way. So over here you have as my context, that is your class name. You defined a object which is named as db and you say new. So now this db will allow me to use the models which are inside that particular context file. So in that context file, what we did was, in that context file that is in your models, you can go and observe that my db context, as I said, we defined these categories. So it allows you to get and set. So when you click on this dbs, it says db.categories, that is over here, dot to list. Now this to list method is defined inside your entity framework. Basically what it does in your SQL is select star from categories. That we used to in your ADO.NET, we used to do it by SQL data reader or adapter or something. That is the manual command which was firing, that is SQL command. Now your entity framework does this task very easily. There are inbuilt functions which allows you to do that. And you can say return view. Now this is the basic fundamental of your MVC. It says return view, and this statement gives the command to the application to search the view which is named as index. So this will bind to the index view. But on index, this won't print automatically. We go on index over here. You can see that it is having a for each loop. So for each loop is for each variable item from the model. The model itself is which? Category. So this will run the loop on the category model. And over here, each and everything is displayed using your model. It says item.name. So this item.name defines this. It prints jeans over here. Now over here, it is edit details and delete. You can go in edit detail and delete over here. You can say it is html.action link. Now this action link does what? The things which has to be printed on the screen and the function which has to be called. There are two things inside it. One is the printing thing, that what I want to print on the screen. On the screen, it should be print edit. So it is written over here, edit. And which function it should call? It should call function edit. So it will search the function edit over here and it will execute what is done over here. So this is how your entity framework scaffolding CRUD operation work. You can see inside your insert, that is create thing. Now the create function we will be seeing right now, that how create works. This is first function, that is create. It just says return view. So return view will return this view directly. That is the insert view. So when you click on create, it will call the view create. It will do nothing, just calling the view create. And then you are having text box over here. We type everything over here, that is this, supposingly I want as tools, and you click on create. So when you click on create, the data is inserted. Now how it is inserted, you can go in the function over here And for that, you are having a second function which is having name as create, the same function name. One will return the view and one will do the actual task. But you can observe that there is something known as HTTP post over here. So HTTP post is your post button is clicked. When the event is fired, this will fire. Normally, only this function will fire. When you click on the button, this function will fire because it is having the HTTP method post over. And from that, it will insert inside your database. That is model state dot is valid. If the model is valid, then go inside db.categories.add. Now a new function. Over here you had toList. Over here you are having a function named as add, and go inside your add function, and then add will add that particular table entry which we want to insert. So that is over here, add in the category. So this is the model name. So whatever is inside your text box, we'll go over here and say db.save changes. So changes are saved, and then I want to redirect back to the index file. So say return redirect to action index. So action index means it will go to the action result index. So it will come back top over here, and it will again call toList. So after inserting, it will again go fetch, that is select star from the table, and it will reflect and print on the. Same goes with edit. When you edit, you can see you are passing one over here. That is passed inside your action link. That is new item.id. So whichever row is created, clicked, the ID is passed, and that ID goes on the top of your page, that is browser, and it will call the function over here named as edit, and inside your edit you can have the parameter named as edit. So that edit comes over here, and then there is a method named as categories. We create the object over here again, model db.categories.find. As you said save, as you said add, as you said toList, there is a method named as find. This is again a method which is predefined inside your DB context, that is context files. So for that, db.categories.find entity framework. So the entity framework method find will give the query as select star from categories where ID equals to this particular ID. So it fetches this record inside your category. It gives it back to the view, return view and category. So inside your edit, the data will be binded again. So data is binded by the model over here. Label for model name, edit for model name. So this will bind the data automatically. So the text boxes are binded. So when you say save, you will again call the second function for edit, which is defined over here again. It goes back to the edit second function. Over here also you observe that is HTTP post. So this will be fire only when the button is clicked. Now what we have to do is we have to update the data over here. So that is db.entry, db is your db context, dot entry, the category dot state equals to modify. If the things are modified, there is some change in that particular text which is typed over here. If changes are done, then db.save changes. Again redirect back to your index. So this is how it works. Last explanation of your delete, how delete will be working is delete also has the same thing. You have to find that record first and then you have to delete it. So delete will find that record, print on the screen. So when you click on delete, what does I say delete? It asks you want to delete this particular thing. And if I say delete, when I click on delete, it will actually delete the record. So this is how it works. It will jump to the next function. Again, the same thing. It is having HTTP post over here, action name, and you click on delete. So for that, categories db.categories.find, again the record has been selected, and then the method remove of your entity framework is called, that is categories.remove in that category, and you say save changes. So this was a brief explanation of how your entity framework MVC CRUD application works inside your ASP.NET MVC. Hope the tutorial is helpful. We will be coming with new tutorials on this MVC. But now what I will do is I will create a tutorial to create the application from scratch instead of using the scaffolding method and the entity framework inbuilt method. No problem. You can use this method also, but as I say, you can use it with direct tables, not linked tables. We can use it with linked tables also, but this is the inbuilt way. You don't have to type anything. Everything is created automatically. We can modify it, no doubt. We can modify it over here as and when we need it, but this is the automated way, scaffolding way. There is one more way, that is your manual way. When it is needed, we can do it using your manual way also. For more tutorials, please like, subscribe my channel, and you will get the links to your new tutorials on each and every IT subjects. This is my first tutorial on your ASP.NET, my favorite one, my favorite programming language. Thank you.